Thank you, Julie. It's come to that time where we actually get to have a speaker that has something to say. We felt good about ourselves. If you don't feel good, pat yourself twice, it'll feel better. We feel good about ourselves. With our plenary speaker, there will be questions at the end. If you would like to submit a question, raise your hand. There are student volunteers anytime in the conference. They will come hand you a 3x5 card. They will bring it up to our technical program chairs, and we will take care of those questions at the end of Judy's talk. So, raise your hand, write on the card, hand it in. That's how it works. Judy is a professor of information and computer science, as well as part of the schools of business and social ecology at the University of California at Irvine. Judy has been part of this community for many years and has been the papers chair for this conference. Judy has contributed in areas of collaboration, distance working of groups, and a variety of things that you have seen if you've attended over the years. I do need to clear up one thing, however. Judy is not my wife. The other guy that's a little round with glasses, that's Gary. That's Judy's husband. I just need to clear that up. With that said, I'd like to introduce you our plenary speaker, Judy Olson.
Wow. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be on this side of the plenary podium. I'm usually about 8 rows back there. But Dan Olson, not related, called me up and said, we need somebody who's been in the field a really long time. And he underscored that. It was a really long time. I thought about it. I said, well, I have been in the field a really long time. The first time I met Ben Schneiderman was 1981 at New York University. There was a symposium there on human factors in computing. He was already famous because of his software psychology book, and I was working at Bell Labs just designing interfaces. But that was the first. This is a picture of Chi 86. I was 9 at the time. Yes, that's the way we dressed, including the little bow at the top. Sorry about that. The big glasses, the windshield glasses. The haircut, I'm not so sure was right for the time. But notice the technology. That's an overhead projector, and for transitions and animation, it was done with pen. In 1988, the University of Michigan Research News highlighted our HCI lab, and I was the cover girl. You notice on the left, it's just plain. On the right, it's fat bits. I sent this to my mother, and she said, "Fat bits? Is this what you do?" I was not alone. I had other people with large windshield glasses helping me. There was Gary. There was Marilyn Manti, now Marilyn Tremaine. There was David Kiris, Paul Green, and we all actually taught a seminar in HCI together. And that was the beginning of the cross-campus HCI work we did at the University of Michigan. It was written up this way: an entirely new scholarly endeavor in the University of Michigan focuses on making the computer work with instead of against the natural inclinations of human beings. And I like that phrase. Yes, we still do things that are beyond our capabilities, but I think just fitting with the natural inclinations is what we're trying to do. So the next big challenge, having accepted this particular position, was to say, what am I going to talk about? The biggest, hardest thing is, you can talk about anything you want to. Well, what's going to be important to me and to you took about 2 months to figure out. But then I thought about it, and I said, well, I have to talk about something that takes the perspective of the organization, the perspective of the history that I, in some way, represent. And I thought about picking up the topics that I thought were most important for now and the future. I did this, important topics warning future research, and the last one on the list turned out to be something I knew something about, and so I thought this would be a good opportunity to expand it. So what I'm going to do is talk through some items I think are very important and then expand on this last one. So what's my method? We always have to have a method slide when we do research. It's talking to other old fogies. Here are more photographs that Ben Schneiderman took. Here's Gary. I talked to Stu Card. These are all black and white. There's George Furness. Talked to Jonathan Gruden, talked to Dan Russell, talked to more people as well. But it's just these were one-on-one, what do you think the important topics are? Unfortunately, we had a list of 25. And if I said, all right, number 1, and then number 2, and number 3, I think that everybody's out. So it's too long for here, but no one wants to hear this. But we will find a venue where we can develop these, hopefully in interactions or some venue like that. But instead, today, what I want to do is pick 4 of those topics that I think are related and expand the last one, the one on social ergonomics, and end with a case that combines all 4. So the first large topic is we have been involved in designing interfaces, good functionality, et cetera. But now we'd like to push to actually design a very large activity. I'm going to give you 3 examples. The first one is information integration. So if you think about the whole big task of writing a novel, think of John McPhee or Jodi Picoult, who do a lot of research beforehand. Jodi Picoult in particular does a lot of research on medicine and the law. And you search and search and search and gather this information, and it's a caricature on the left-hand side, but there is this problem about you've found a lot of things and how are you going to integrate it. Many novelists will take all of this information and then make a storyboard, like the one in the middle, that has all the story arcs about who's going to be coming in and out and how we resolve everything, then involving writing one or a series of novels, like you see on the right. Similarly, in how to design a large activity, let's think about emergency medical care from all the participants' points of view. There's the patient, of course, who is clueless about what's actually happening, all the staff, the talented staff, there are the physicians, there's the caretakers, the whole set. A couple of years ago at the Chi Plenary, Tim Brown actually gave us a good hint in how to begin to think about designing a very large activity. He said, in particular, you put down all the steps from a particular person's point of view, the steps from somebody else's point of view, and at each point you ask 4 questions. Is the person's time and energy valued? Are we treating the whole person? Is the person informed? Does the person have a sense of control? I can tell you my experiences in the emergency room, more than one is far enough, right? But I've been there several times. Those 4 questions, the answer is no. The one hint I had was, is the person informed? And there was on the wall a little chart saying, if this person comes in with a red scrubs on or green scrubs, who are they? Some are administrators, some are medical personnel, et cetera. But knowing what was going to happen next, we were clueless. All right, the third one I want to talk about as a large design activity is, what I wish for is an informed participatory democracy. That's at the large social scale. There are hints that some things like this are going to happen because Barack Obama, when he was in the campaign, asked for all of the videos of the debates to be put on the Commons. And that succeeded. The question I have is, what happened after that? Did that make it so that we had a better public debate, or did clips show up on YouTube? Meaning the bad clips or the goofs and things like that. That's why I don't like this videotaped. It's going to be, some spoofs are going to happen about what I'm talking about. But also Vivek Kundra is the new CIO. Day by day we say, is he still? But he's young, entrepreneurial, and his main theme is to make the government transparent. So we're seeing hints about moving in the direction, but if you had to design this large activity, if you had to design an informed participatory democracy, where would you start? Since so many things are intertwined. So this is one important research topic I think we have to progress on. All right, the second one is the field has moved from HCI being inside the head and the computer to understanding really well how the human is in a context working with other people in space with a variety of technologies. So we've moved to having a lot of different field studies, excellent deep field studies. But I think a really important research topic is what domains are like other domains. If you have a control tower in an airport, if you have control of a nuclear plant, and if you have control of the underground, the London Underground, In what ways are these similar? In what ways are these different? Which piece parts can actually be transferred to other kinds of situations? I think we need to do some research on this. The third one is human-robot interaction. Many of you know about Roomba. Roomba is the little vacuum cleaner that runs around. You go away, you turn on the vacuum cleaner, it does this random walk across your room, and by the time you come home, it's clean. First, we should have robot-pet interaction. Those people who are, or those creatures who are left at home, there's a very funny YouTube with this cat riding Roomba around the room, just being happy as clam, just riding around. And then near the end, it starts hitting the little green light in the front, trying to get control over what's happening. So anyway, there's human-robot, or there's pet-robot interaction. Many robots we're trying to have gestures and facial expressions like humans. There's a lot of good research on that, but they don't have to look like humans. R2-D2 had a lot of human-like behaviors in the way he ran around, how close he came, the little whistles he had. So there's something understood about the human-robot interaction that made him a social animal. All right, the fourth one, the one I want to expand a bit more on, is called social ergonomics. And I like to parody our Distance Matters paper by saying even small distance matters. This is a wonderful statue, a bronze statue in Calgary. And in its statue-ness is actually conveying an interaction. So the man on the left is clearly talking to the man on the right and wanting to get closer by having a gesture on his arm. The man on the right is pushing back gently by having his hand in between and saying, you know, we need to talk about this. So there's a dance that's going on here. So there's a lot of things going on with gestures, eye contact, distance between people that I think are important to understand when we're doing design of social technologies. So I'm going to expand on this one. Ergonomics. What are the characteristics of human, physical, and mental capabilities that guide our design? That's the official definition. And lots of the research had to do with workloads, stress, positions, how much can you lift and how high can you lift things. A lot of these have actually then helped furniture designers, though I don't think furniture designers anticipated this particular posture in their chair. The second is the the cognitive ergonomics, and that has to do with mental workload, stress, physical placement of things so your eyes can see it. And what I want to add here is social ergonomics, understanding the ways people interpret social interactions so as to inform design and use. There are lots of things we can borrow from anthropology, sociology, psychology, etc., to put together a set of this is how people behave. And now we're going to actually look at how that impacts how it's changed when we're going to have technology intervening. The interesting thing is that people are not particularly aware of these particular social ergonomic rules that we live by until they're violated. You can violate them today and see the reaction if you go into an elevator and face the back and then make eye contact with people. If that happened to you, you'd be creeped out because, you know, that's against the rules. Many people don't pay attention to them until they're broken or until the technology help you see what's a problem. So here's a man who has been on an audio teleconference for an hour and a half. He cannot hear very well, and so what does he do? He keeps leaning in until he can hear. He didn't realize he was doing this until he stood up after an hour and a half and went, and I said, so could you turn up the volume? Oh, what an idea. Right? So we're often not aware. We're just trying to get the work done and not saying, how is this going? So I want to talk about these categories about social ergonomics. The physics of space and reciprocity, just the way it is normally. Things having to do with distance and spatial arrangement. Good things about conversation that apply to the technologies we're going to use. Impression management and time. So those are the things we're going to go through now. Showing you the basic principles and then how technology breaks them. So the basic physics of space. The further away someone is, the smaller they appear on your eye. The further away, the softer one sounds. When the sound comes from where the people physically are, and if you can see them, they can see you, unless you're purposely hiding behind something. There's also a whole field called proxemics. This is great, I love this, and you'll notice this as I go through it. You have various distances from you which dictate what kind of behavior the other person or you is going to behave in. So if somebody is beyond 10 feet away from you, they will behave as if it's a public. You do not have to acknowledge this person at all. You don't have to say anything to them. That's just public space. As soon as they hit 10 feet, there is an acknowledgement that happens. It's like, or you purposely look away because you don't want to interact. When they get into your personal space, which is about 4 feet away, is when you have a conversation. I notice this all the time when we have these huge halls in this building, and you will as well. You see somebody more than 10 feet away, and you go, I have a little nit on here. You look down, you're like, and then suddenly they're at 10 feet, and you go, hi. And then if you want to have a conversation, then you move closer, right? There's also something called the intimate space, is just 1.5 feet around you, and you only allow certain people into that space. Or you're forced in an elevator to be in that space, and you take corrective action. I'll get to that in a minute. I had an employee at Bell Labs when I was there who we were very crowded in our offices, and he knew about proxemics. And there were offices with 2 and sometimes 3 desks, and he put this poster up in front of his desk and said, "You are in my intimate space." Right? And everybody, ooh. All right, so how you speak depends on the distance to the recipient. So again, these circles coming out from you. If you're beyond 10 feet, it's like this, all right? I'm going to pronounce. We're not having a conversation. I'm not listening to you. I see your faces, which is part of a conversation, but it's a public pronouncement. As soon as you're in the 10 feet space, then it's the greetings. Personal conversation within 4 feet. And then intimate is typically not much talking, but whispers and gestures. Not much needs to be said in that particular space. And you only allow your intimates there. Your spouse, your family, the grandchildren, who's going to sit on your lap, right? Not your friend, right? But your grandchild's going to be there. All right, what other behaviors do we see? Closeness and eye contact commands attention. All right, that's in each other's intimate space there, and they mean it as something to grab your attention. Every once in a while I illustrate this in my class by walking up close to the people in the front row, and they go, whoa. Suddenly their heads are up, and it's just the distance I'm there that commands that attention. When forced to be close, you avoid eye contact. This is the elevator example, and what do? We all face forward, and we look rapturously at what floor we're at now. Right? Because if you do anything else, that gets some contact with the other people. All right, there are individual differences. There are differences by culture. There are differences by gender, associated with gender. The differences by culture, I have been at parties with people from Italy, and they have a different set of circles. And so I'm talking to an Italian, and he or she comes close to me, and I back up. And they come close, and I back up, and I come close. And suddenly I'm against the wall, all right, like this woman is. And at that point, uncomfortable I am, say, look, I don't have anything in my glass. I'll have to refresh that. And off you go. You escape from that because it's too close. We also find this phenomena in our language. In your face, people who are at arm's length, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. We also notice that seating in this culture, in the US culture, at 90 degrees is most comfortable. If you're actually seated across and facing, it's more confrontive. There's a power relationship going on. This is a more comfortable angle. And people who are competing choose to sit further away than those that are cooperating. I find that very interesting. Maybe the competition suggests the other one gets angry, they're going to swing out at you or something, right? And you want to be far enough away so that doesn't actually hit you. So now we got broken physics of space. So we've got video conferencing. Not today's video conferencing, but a very common video conferencing that people, the TV set and the cameras way across the room, they zoom out so they can see everybody, and everybody's really tiny. And there's a standard phenomena when people are very tiny on your eye, you will speak up, right? And so even though you could turn up the volume on this, you don't. People are going, so George, and if you can't hear them, you assume they can't hear you, and again, you crank up your voice. So there are some modern video conferencing setups that are better than that. This one makes it look like everybody's around the same table. There are three remote locations there. The sound comes from each one instead of one speaker, and then you could make eye contact. We made this setup with simple technologies in the early 90s, and conveniently these photos were taken with 3 people with different colors on. So you may notice in the top one we had a TV set and a camera, a microphone and a speaker here, a TV set, camera, microphone, and speaker here, so that when I leaned close to this one, it got louder to that and softer to this one, so there was spatial audio. And when the other 2 people looked at each other in their settings, they looked to me like they're looking at each other. So in the top one, you can see we are conversing not with the woman in red, but with each other, and it looks like we're facing each other. We originally set this up unknowing of this, and it looked, when the other 2 people were talking with each other, it looked like they're looking out the door. All right, we said, well, that's not right. So that's the time when we got them to face each other. So we have good high quality video conferencing at the top, but it's often set up face to face, which may be okay if we understand it's not intended to be confrontive, but would probably be more relaxing if it were the guy on the right who's doing this at 90 degrees. I did some work at a large company, a large automobile manufacturer, who had the kind of video conferencing that was on that first sheet. And I set him up with things that were bigger, had the eye contact with the camera, had the stereo audio, and he said his blood pressure went down because he had to do 2 3-hour video conferences a week. And he said, every time I came out of those, I was so tense, because probably in the back of his head, he's trying to interpret all the things he's seeing and hearing and having a difficult time at it. So other cases when we expect in real physics, if I can see you, you can see me. Well, I was doing a demonstration of See You, See Me, which is in the mid-90s, with a bunch of executives. I was in my office, they came in, and I sat down and put up a session like this. And after a while, we hear, "Hey, babe, looking good." It clearly wasn't anybody who was on the screen, because none of their mouths moved. But there was somebody lurking, and indeed, they could see me, but I couldn't see them. Furthermore, they couldn't see that I was giving a demo to a bunch of executives, so this is totally inappropriate behavior. And I had to explain everything about how that's happening. So there are other cases, though they can see and hear you, they assume you're nearby in the same time zone. So this story was, for a number of years, I was teaching in the Netherlands every spring in a 2-week course. And one of those 2 weeks was a time when they wanted me to speak back at Michigan. So I said, oh, we can do this with video conferencing. So wanting to make it look professional, I had to set it up in the computing center in Rotterdam, where I was. And I said, well, we don't want all of this junk behind me, so let's just put a background. And to remind them I'm in the Netherlands, we had a vase of tulips and we had the Dutch flag. So this was in the afternoon on Friday. And I gave my talk, we had a good discussion, but it was indeed 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon there, but 7 and 8 o'clock where I was. The discussion went on and on and on among the people who were there, but not involving me. And I'm going, dun, 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 dun. Do I have to still be here? It turned out even worse, that it was Friday, May 5th, which is Liberation Day in the Netherlands. There were celebrations because it was the 50th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands. So there were parties going on outside behind me. Right? My technical help really wanted to go do that instead of sitting here and I'm not even participating in this. So I finally had to say, so you seem to be having a good discussion. It is 11 o'clock at night where I am. Can I sign off? Right? So I had made it so comfortable for them to say, you're here, forgetting really where I was. Right? So that was broken. Now there's some really nice data that comes from Gloria Mark and Aaron Bradner that I find very fascinating and to me is a big mystery. So people communicating by email or IM, when they believe the person is in a distant city rather than a close city, so they're not nearby, but it's, close city versus a distant city, are more likely to deceive, less likely to cooperate, and less likely to be persuaded. So that's just the belief, that's not even actuality. So there's something we have in us about how we behave with people long distance that's endemic to how we're going to behave with people when we connect. Okay, more things about distance. If I zoom the camera in, it looks as if I'm close. I gave the opposite before about when you're far away. And what happens on YouTube? All right, these people are in my face, especially that one. But in Facebook, that's what you want. It's a friend, something, they're creating something that is feeling like intimacy. I noticed, though, that when you put in your photograph for your profile, the little snippet that says who you are when you're conversing is actually one of these zoomed in things, all right? Facebook does that for you, understanding that that will make you feel closer. So the second topic I want to talk about in social ergonomics is conversation. When we're having a normal conversation, if I stop and you don't start again after 2 seconds, I'm going to assume you don't want to turn, and so I will start again. All right, so if you don't start speaking in 2 seconds, that was your chance to pick up the turn, and I say, oh, he doesn't want to, I'll just continue. That'll play out in this. I'll show you how that's broken in a minute. You also take turns by signaling eye contact. The person speaking will look at you first, and then while they're thinking of things, they look away. That's, you know, making sure there's enough space for mental energy there. And when they're ready to give up the turn, they'll look back at you. The listener, however, is looking all the time, if they are interested. And then if they don't want to turn, they will look away. If they do want to turn, they'll look. So the eye movement, the dance of eye contact, turns out to be very important in making sure the flow goes smoothly. And then, yeah, looking at someone indicates a desire to speak. So my daughter is a very good social ergonomist. When she goes off to a conference, a professional conference, and she goes to a reception where there are a lot of people she doesn't know, she will find a circle of people who are talking. In understanding proxemics and eye contact, she will do the following. She will find the interesting thing. She will move up behind some of the people, right where the split is, and look at the speaker and nod and smile. Right? She is so close to the people, right, that she's behind that they will open and make a space for her. And suddenly she's in the conference. Try that. Right? You are empowered to look and use the social proxemics. All right, we are good at detecting eye contact, but there's some very interesting data about which ways we can detect more or less. We're good at noticing when somebody is gazing right at us. We are very good at noticing when they look left or right. So if you're at a party and you're conversing with somebody and they look this way, saying, I wonder if there's somebody more interesting over there, you're very quick to pick it up. If they look slightly up or down, you are not, there's a bigger zone there that you don't see it, right? So left-right is much more sensitive than up and down. This will become important. And it's also interesting that we assume the person's looking at us until we have good evidence that they're not. We're nice about that. We say, oh, you must be liking me. You're looking at me, until we see very definitely they're going, okay? So we pick that up. Gestures support content. A lot of people say if you tie my hands, I can't speak, because we have gestures to point, we have gestures to emphasize things. And also, we want to look at the person to make sure we're being understood. I've noticed this when I go to another country where English is not their native language. When I'm speaking English to them, I watch to see whether they're understanding or not. So they are giving me back channel by going like that. And if they don't do anything, I will keep talking to make sure that they're understanding. So you talk much longer when you don't have that back channel. So there's a visual back channel and there's an auditory back channel. When you're speaking, like Andrea's doing right now, oh yeah, I didn't know that. And she's doing the same time I'm talking. And you can hear the etc. All right, breaking conversation. When you don't have video, what happens? Well, for people who have a lot in common, you don't need the video. You can get your work done. Right? For people who do not have a lot in common, this is like speaking to people who may or may not understand. We ran a study with people who are non-native speakers of English and native speakers of English, and it was the non-native speakers of English that really needed the video, because they needed to look to see whether they were understood. You see the woman on the left, does she understand? Maybe not. Or you want to make sure that she gets more comfortable, and he is making gestures to help explain what he's talking about. Eye direction will be interpreted. No matter what's happening with the technology, people normally interpret looking away, looking down as inattention, right? Even though this is created because the camera is high on the screen and they are looking at you, your eyes. We often recommend, if you're setting up things like that, to move the view of the other person so their eyes are as close as possible to the camera, so that when you look at their eyes, it's within that zone of forgiveness for up-down. If you put it to the side, they're going to notice right away that you're not looking at them. Okay, another way in which conversation is broken. I said that if I don't speak for 2 seconds, then I can pick up the floor again. Well, it turns out codecs are translating the audio to digital, digital back, and that takes time. In video conferencing, it's the whole video signal plus the audio, making a much longer delay. So many people have a video conference and turn off the audio with that, and then just have a teleconference, which has much less delay. So even though there's a mismatch between the voice and people's mouths, it turns out the delay in audio is much more important. I have a way of displaying this. One moment. Where's my mouse? Do you have a mouse? Yes, I'll have to do it down there. This is a 2-minute clip from Prairie Home Companion.
Your private eye coming up in a little bit. First, we're going to pause for this special news report.
A nation in crisis looks inward.
This is Linda Wertheimer, NPR News in Washington, with a special report from the Middle East. With me on the line from the mountain province of Donandistan, from the provincial capital of Really Bad, is correspondent John Notright with breaking news report that a plane load of terrorists is on its way to the U.S. at this very moment. John, can you hear me?
Yes,
I hear me now. Sorry, I stepped on you there. It's
Sorry,
Linda. Go ahead, John. Go ahead. We have you, John. Go ahead.
Having a little trouble with the satellite delay there.
Yes, I understand there's a delay with the satellite. Go ahead, please.
You want me to go ahead now?
Yes, go ahead, John. We're ready for you now, John.
The provincial capital of... I'm sorry, Linda, did you say something?
I said we're ready for your report, John.
You want me to do that now, Linda?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Standing by and Really Bad here. Whenever you're ready, Linda.
Can you hear me, John?
I can hear you, Linda.
Good. We'd like your report now, John.
Just waiting for your cue, Linda.
Let's go to John Notright and Really Bad. Now for this,
sorry.
John.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
John.
Yes, Linda.
I'm being as clear as I possibly can.
You're coming in loud and clear, Linda.
John, I'm going to turn it over to you now for your report.
You
Do
want
you
my
read
report
me now, John? John, listen to me. We're all waiting to hear your report
right
from
here,
Really Bad. John.
You get the point. Those who would like the URL, I'm happy to send it. It is a 6-minute clip, and it ends with them being extremely angry with each other. And she is very directive of him, and he's just not cooperating. And it turns out there's not a airplane load of terrorists, there's an airplane load of tourists, which he reported because he was really bored. There's nothing to do here in Really Bad. Okay. We break conversations in other ways. When we're just doing audio only, there's no eye contact to signal attention or turn taking. I love the story of Tom Erickson, who is a constant telecommuter. Wherever he's been working, he lives in Minneapolis. But he's taught us about what he calls the telecommuter's cough. They forget you're there on the telephone, and so every once in a while he'll go, they go, oh yes, Tom, do you have something to say? Or sometimes, I understand, his dog will bark in the background. Oh yes, Tom. Right? So you have to signal your presence often when you don't have any other video signals. The volume indicates distance. If you can't hear them, you assume that you're not being heard. But many of us indeed have a little dial on our telephone, right? But is that making me louder or their speaker? And I don't know, right? And we don't play with that because we're not quite sure what's going to happen. So we should all read our telephone instruction booklets to know whether we have to speak louder or we can just hear them better or tell them the right thing. Also, many telephones are single duplex, meaning when somebody's speaking, you cannot speak across them. It's only one at a time. Full duplex, you can. So if there's a single duplex and somebody's speaking, you cannot interrupt either with, I want to clarify something, or I understand. So no back channels like, So look for telephones when you're doing these serious things that have full duplex. All right, impression management. We do make judgments about people, from clothes, stance, cleanliness, their actions, and I think interestingly, taking part in rituals. So when I was in England, I went to the grocery store, and I didn't understand what kind of fish they had, so I moved right up to the cabinet, and then I was looking, you know, John Dory and these other kinds of things, and this woman said, "We queue here, dearie." So I was breaking the ritual, and was clearly a foreigner, meaning I should stand in line and wait my turn, as opposed to looking like I'm jumping the line. So you notice these impression management things when you violate them. Here's one that's sad. Tall people on average are more influential. It comes from this early experience you have, but it turns out that if you are taller, gender controlled for, you're more likely to get promoted, because we have this reaction to people that the taller people are more influential. Cameramen know this. They use this in various kinds of movies. Low angle makes people look taller. Here's a wonderful scene in Pride and Prejudice where Mr. Darcy's telling Mr. Bingley that he can't marry Jane, and the camera does this next to Mr. Darcy and this next to Mr. Bingley. So it's clear that there's, you know, trying to convey the influence. We did an interesting study where we had the camera and the monitor up high, making this person look short, and another one where the monitor and camera were down low, making this person look tall. And indeed, the artificially tall person was more influential. This is a background thing that we may not be aware of in placement of our equipment. We used to have a video conferencing on a cart that was way high, and I kept looking up, and it was our sponsor, and I kept feeling like a supplicant. Oh yes, whatever. All right. When they are more eye to eye, you get the same kind of power relationship. All right, you check out what you look at the other end. I'm very interested in the fact that I have to control how I come across at the other end. So I don't want to be like that in a meeting, right? Big, right? Well, whatever. I want to be like the other people in the room. So you set it up so the zoom is correct, etc. I'm running short of time, so I have to move ahead a bit here. So let me talk about this. There are differences in how people interpret time. In the US, we say time is money. You have to be on time for various kinds of things. In other countries, time is spent with the person you're with until you're done, and then you will move on to the other. So I have to tell you this story. I'm in France. I'm watching this three-way interaction between France and Bordeaux and Germany, and the man in pink is about to retire. The link to the US at the end of the meeting was shut off immediately because time is money. The link to Cologne, Germany, stayed on, and they roasted this guy. It was a building a relationship thing. And though I was embarrassed at first for the US, I said, no, they just have a different set of values, but that these people in France and Germany are interpreting. They're not evil, but it is misunderstood because they have a different sense of time. We also make attribution errors. If it's someone you know, you will say, if there's a delay, you say, something must have come up. If there's a delay with someone you don't know, you say, they don't like me, right? It's a personal attribution as opposed to something must have come up. And we see this in non-response to email a lot, that I say, this person doesn't like me, when in fact it's a holiday in their country, all right, and they're off doing something perfectly normal, but we make the attribution error. So you have to design your cognitivity with social ergonomics in mind, and you should look at physics, reciprocity, distance, conversation, impression management, and time. I want to talk a little bit about some designs we are working on now that take social ergonomics into account. First, the background. We did a study on what was called radical collocation. So that a set of systems engineers were put in a room together for 6 weeks, no other offices. It was a large room, but their desks were there, the whiteboards, tables, things like that. It turned out in that experiment that the productivity doubled. They were asking us about why. We were the observers. And they said, well, you could be aware of what people were doing. You were available to other people. And you could have ad hoc meetings, which is shown in this pair of slides. In the left-hand side, there's a meeting at the whiteboard and 2 people sitting on the side. The 2 people sitting on the side overhear what's happening at the board, and they come and join them because it's important. They just knew what was going on. Nobody had to schedule the meeting, it just happened. So we are trying to decide how to do this virtually. Can we get this kind of awareness, availability, ad hoc meetings? We have 3 solutions for this, which fit very different kinds of settings. The first one is, of course, having a video wall. Video walls have been tried many other times, but the social ergonomics were not right. The camera was up or beneath or way to the side. And what we're doing is putting the camera in it. So between the panels is the camera. And we have a very nice interface to put up whatever you're talking about between this one location and another location. This is going to serve very well for 2 major locations, but it doesn't serve very well for 1 major location and 1 person that is distant, or many people, all of whom are distant. The second solution we're working on is something like Second Life, but it's a different rendering. The additions here are, as you move your avatar around, you can hear other people socially appropriately, and then as you walk by somebody's computer screen, you can see what they're doing, which is what you do when you are face-to-face. This, of course, requires the extra interaction of moving my avatar instead of just being natural, but it's one worth experimenting on. This third solution is one that Gina Venolia has come up with, I just love, embodied social proxy. So in this case, the person is remote and there is a video conferencing thing on a laptop. It's George Robertson, and you can see him in the back of the meeting, right? He is on wheels. So when you don't need him for a meeting, you cart him into his own office. I'll show you that. Here's George in his office. He's just doing his stuff, and there's a view on the screen about what he's working on and what the weather is and where they are, etc. But that's George in his office. This is what George sees. He's actually asked for various kinds of cameras, one to zoom in, one to have a good sense of what all is going on in the room. So this actually is an inspiration for what I want to talk about next. It'll only take a couple of minutes to do that. The closing case I want to talk about takes the 4 themes I talked about at the beginning and puts them together. Designing a large activity, building from field work, human-robot interaction, and social ergonomics, an area that's very ripe for study. It is the remote physician as a robot. This is an article we read a week ago in the Orange County Register, and I found out that this is actually a whole movement going on. It is George in a box in a robot. So you see on the left, there's the video conferencing, and there's a man there, and he controls his own position, right? And then he has a consult in the hall, and he also then is by the bedside on the right-hand side. You notice that he understands social ergonomics about how close you stand to people, where your eyes are going, who's paying attention. It's very interesting that the little monitor and camera, the camera doesn't move by itself, it moves with the monitor. So you can see what somebody is actually looking at by tracing their faces. We can look at reciprocity. We don't want to have a camera in the patient's room because the patient never knows when that's going to be on, and that's very upsetting. But when the guy rolls in, it's very clearly a new incident. This is what it looks like from the remote physician's point of view. He's got a joystick that he's controlling his view, and he makes sure that his head is the right size in the middle of that little video. Here's one that actually got dressed. And here she is having a conversation in the hall, and indeed the top moves back and forth. There are YouTubes on this that you can see. And this is my favorite. This is downtime at night. She's plugged into the wall. Everybody has to rest. Okay, in closing, these are very exciting times. You can apply some of the things I talked about today in your everyday world. So when you set up video conferencing or you have some kind of video connectivity or whatever, understand what the dynamics are about time, about reciprocity, etc. Don't step on each other socially like we had Linda Wertheimer and John, what was his name? John No Good or something like that. Anyway, we're stepping on each other. Well, that applies quite universally. Don't step on each other socially. And there's lots of good research left to do. Thank you very much. Now comes the really hard part.
All right. Before I get to these questions from the audience, I just want to announce that if anyone is giving a Chi Madness today and you're not already seated over here, you should come over here right now and talk to the Madness chairs. All right.
Okay.
So one question is that a lot of what you're talking about feels good for desktop and video conference setups. But do you have any thoughts about how social ergonomics ideas would translate into mobile devices or small screen devices, especially once devices like that support video?
Well, if it's a small device, first of all, the face is going to be small, right? And then you may shout at it. If they move in close, like those, the Facebook, right? Then you may have an easier conversation with them because they look closer to you as opposed to a little tiny person on there. So those that, it has to do with the size of the device and how that translates into what you see and hear.
So much of what you described as is relevant for closed audience settings where only invited participants are there. So this questioner is wondering how your ideas might apply to situations like Facebook and Twitter, where you assume there's some public viewing of your interactions.
Well, that's clearly a case of non-reciprocity. So I cannot see them that they can see me. So I'm not aware. In fact, I experience this all the time on Facebook. This last week, some of you know that my luggage was lost. And when we got here, people who had not responded to me said, "Oh, you got your jacket." And they were, not people I had known that were on there. So this non-reciprocity, or the lurking part, was a bit off-putting, even though I am public to all the people I've made friends with. I have friends who are active and friends who are inactive, and I never know whether they're looking and not responding. So I think there's just some pieces there that are a bit broken.
Rather than undertaking complex redesign of communication systems to meet the needs of social ergonomics, do you think that people can simply be re-educated about these underlying phenomena and then through greater self-awareness overcome them?
I do, because there are lots of cultural differences that you're surprised at the first time you see them, but if you travel enough, you understand where you are and how to behave and how to interpret in those locations. So I think experience does matter. Some of them, though, under stress, you're going to go back to your your learned first responses and not take the interpretation into account. So I think, yeah, when we're thinking about it, I think it can be good. So understanding about eye contact, and you're now going to have a conversation and be very aware of your hands, and are you looking, and is he looking at me, and it's a little off-putting to be too aware at the beginning, but then just knowing that that's happening, I think you'll see over time how it can change.
Today, many companies are deploying more and more globally distributed software development teams. Have you studied how social ergonomics would impact performance in situations such as these?
Yes, I've done a lot of work on global development teams. There are a lot of sort of low-level things that teams can do to help establish relationships with the other people at other locations. Number one, just having, what do they look like? Number two, having social chat with these people. What do you do on vacation? It actually changes the trust level you have with other people. So there are activities you can do to actually help, but I think, again, the managers and the participants have to be aware that this is time well spent. That if you go off and do a ropes course or do something virtual, I think Wendy Kellogg has a ropes course in Second Life that people participate in. So I think being aware that this is a problem and worth it, we have to spend time on it.
Another audience member was wondering how social ergonomics would apply to more abstract forms of virtual interaction. So as an example, they gave the poking interaction on Facebook.
Never having poked or been poked. I'm not sure quite how to respond to that. But I think it's implying a short distance that I can do this to you because I'm that close. And I would only like that to happen if somebody really were psychologically close to me as opposed to somebody long distance. But having not poked, I'm not sure whether I'm answering that right.
All right.
Close enough?
And one final question that we have time for today is that your observations about social ergonomics make a lot of sense, particularly in business contexts. But this questioner was wondering how your observations and theories would apply to different types of groups, such as groups of children or groups of family members, and whether this would be different to or similar to the types of situations you were talking about.
We don't have enough research on that. That's why I think this is important and something to continue on. It'd be very interesting to see how children learn the things that our adults are doing about proper distance. I know that we have a 4-year-old grandson, and he has not yet learned his indoor voice. He has learned about that, not whether he can hear. And again, watching family members, there's a lot of social dynamics that would be interesting, and then engaging whether the family is functional or not, or what the social connections are by just watching their behavior about distance and things like that. I think that's rich for opportunities. So I was born a voyeur, in that I am a social scientist that just likes to go watch all kinds of situations. Everything we do is data. You know, you get stuck in traffic, this is data. Go look and see who's looking where, things like that. So you should do that as well, and then do it formally. You find interesting things, and then go off and do the research formally to find out what these things, how they differ, and what we can do to help them.
Great. Okay. Well, there were a lot more interesting questions that we didn't have time to ask during the plenary, but I hope if you had a question that Judy didn't get a chance to answer, that you seek her out during the next few days of CHI and make some time to talk to her.
I'll be here.
She'll be there, and let's all thank Judy one more time for her talk.
Thank you. Thank you.